Hey guys, Bice Bump here, bringing you this Unholy Death Knight The War Within update, because we've been buffed quite significantly depending on the build, but as always, let's take a look at exactly what has changed, how it impacts us, and what we're going to feel and think about it. Jumping straight into it, we have a lot of buffs to Sun Lane. Vampiric Strike chance to trigger increased 25%, was 10%. I think this is probably the most significant one. Previously, what happened quite frequently was that you had Pressure Dark Transformation, you stacked up your Essence of the Blood Queen buff, you know, that haste buff you get when you use Vampiric Strike. Dark Transformation would finish, and then you would try and fish for Vampiric Strike in between your Dark Transformation windows, and if you're unlucky, the haste buff would drop and you had to restart all over again in the next Dark Transformation. This change has now completely removed that, essentially. If you look at Sims, for instance, in a perfect scenario where you're always on a boss, you have 97% uptime. So you pretty much never drop the haste buff in between Dark Transformations, which is a great thing. We also had Frenzy's Bloodthirst, damage of Death Call and Death Strike increased by 5% per stack, was 4%, just a small buff to that talent. We have Visceral Strength, grants 8% strength, that was 6%. That is another buff, but importantly, there's also been a hotfix that means that Visceral Strength now affects total strength instead of base strength. I will talk about this later because Rider also got buffed due to this. But previously, we have a couple of strength buffs that wouldn't buff your total strength. So if you have 15k, it wouldn't multiply that by 1.08. It would actually take your base before you added everything on top of it with items and things and buff that, which was just much less. So that is actually a big buff in conjunction with this 6 to 8%. All right, yeah, that's the issue as well. All right, so overall, how important this is? Well, Sun Lane essentially got buffed by around 7%, which is a lot. So it is now much more competitive, and it's like a proper choice. Previously, like Rider was just miles ahead, and you would never consider picking Sun Lane. Now it's a good choice. The thing is that it does roughly the same as Rider in pure single target, but then it doesn't have the benefit of Rider where, you don't need to augment your rotation, you've got lots of mobility to death charge, and essentially it's much easier to play with Rider. So I still recommend Rider, but this is a big buff to Sun Lane and it's now a viable alternative. Anyway, moving on to the hotfix here, which is not very visible, so that's kind of like what this is, a hidden buff. We have Apocalyptic Conquest now correctly modifies total strength. That was base strength as well. This is really big. That is a 4% buff to Unholy. So even though Unholy doesn't show up in any of the tuning, they actually hotfixed a thing which made us get buffed by 4% with the Riders. So essentially, previously we had Sun Lane was like quite far behind, and then Rider was significantly ahead. They buffed Sun Lane by 7%, Rider by 4%, and they're pretty even now. But we pretty much always run Rider anyway. Anyway, those were the news for today. Thank you for coming to Bicep Sums, weekly, whatever. Anyway, thank you much for tuning in. Upvote, downvote, subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.